Hey, what's going on? It's your boy Dalton from the Petrol List, and we have a ton of Formula One stuff to get through. You know, off-season testing, which teams are doing well, which teams are doing not so well, who was the worst team. We're going to cover stuff like that. We're also going to cover the 12-cylindry Spider, the Ferrari 12-cylindry Spider, and it was the inspiration for the title of this video. Automotive journalism has a huge problem. I will talk about that very soon. But first, I wanted to point out something that you may have already noticed, and that is the fact that I'm sitting down for a Petrolist video, and this is the first occurrence of that for a very long time. Here's how that happened. I was going through some old footage, some old videos, and I saw a video where I was sitting down and I was like, man, I kind of like that aesthetic. I look like a news reporter. I can put my little notebook here. I got my Petrolist branded coffee mug sitting right here. This is very cool. I might stay this way. I might keep doing videos sitting down unless I lose like a crap load of subscribers because they prefer that I stand up. Please don't unsubscribe just because I'm sitting down. Enjoy it, man. Enjoy it. It's gonna be a good show. All right, where was I? The Ferrari 12-cylindry Spider, and also Ferrari, you've got to work on your names. What happened to the F40? What happened to the Enzo? What happened to the Daytona? 12-cylindry Spider. Anyway, so the article that I read said that this car had an amazing sensory experience, or how did they word it? Maybe it was provided an amazing sensory experience. All I know is that's just boring. Saying that a car gives an amazing sensory experience, or whatever it is they said for sensory experience, it's a problem because it's boring. I don't know what kind of sensoriness they're talking about. My Miata has motor mounts that are made of concrete, so the engine vibrates all over the place. It's got flat, aluminum seats that are bolted directly to the chassis. The chassis has been stiffened. It's got a roll bar. It's got lowered suspension. And a custom intake or whatever, modified intake. So that's very much a sensory experience because it's over a long enough period of time. It's a very uncomfortable car. But if you're just, gonna go carve through the B roads or the side roads and stuff, or take it to the track, the sensory input or the sensory experience is amazing because there's like a cacophony of modifications and characteristics that come together to make you feel like you're in a race car, even when you're just going to, pick up something from the grocery store. The S4 has a sensory experience in a different way because it's loud. It's got modified intake exhaust, suspension, And of course, I had the Jaguar F-Type R, which I would say is the closest thing to the 12-cylindry Spider as I can think of. Now, the Ferrari 12-cylindry Spider is a $500,000 car. The Jaguar F-Type R is not that. But what it is it's a high horsepower front engine, rear drive sports coupe. And that is about the closest of any vehicle that I've owned that I can compare. Now, with that said, the Jaguar F-Type R had a great sensory experience, if you will, but compared to the S4 and the Miata, driving on the street was actually kind of boring. You have to get up to highway speeds and you have to really be pushing that car before it turns into a great sensory experience. And that leads me into the problem that automotive journalism has, and that is, how do you describe the experience of cars? It used to be back in the day, if a car had 190 horsepower, people's minds were blown and they're like, yo, that car is getting up there. And all you had to do was recite a couple of numbers. And yeah, you could talk about the engine noise and you could talk about, the gear shift and whatnot. And you could give your reader a sense of what was going on with the car. But right now, because cars have so much, sound deadening, a lot of them are automatics or, flappy paddle manual transmissions, which I think all Ferraris are right now. There's not a whole lot to talk about. It's an 819 horsepower, 6.5 liter naturally aspirated V12, which all of that combined together sounds amazing. But what if I'm a reader that doesn't know what all of that combined does? A lot of readers won't know. You know, a turbocharged infrastructure, if you will, makes an engine sound different. Supercharged makes it sound different. A naturally aspirated, especially, you know, big displacement engine, 6.5 liters in this case, you know, that paints a picture for me in terms of like, yeah, it's going to be boisterous, it's going to be loud, because I understand what the different powertrains and stuff like, you know, sound like and what they feel like. But if you're a young reader, then you're like, great, what does all that mean? What does it mean for me? Then especially, you know, with hybridization and, you know, electric and stuff, we're slowly getting rid of the different characteristics that a car had that you could describe, and now all you can really say is, hey, this thing is 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. But these days, what car isn't? So I don't know what language folks are going to use. I don't know what language automotive journalists are going to use moving forward to accurately describe what they're feeling in a car. But I think, you know, it's going to be a fun problem to resolve. You know, it'll be fun to see how automotive journalists describe these things. They're going to have to, I don't know what they're going to have to do. Maybe I'll do an episode on it in the future, how I would describe my interaction with a car. But it's going to have to change, because you can't just say, you know, sensory experience anymore, because it doesn't mean what it used to mean. And in many ways, it doesn't have as defined of a meaning as it used to. Anyway, that's enough. That's enough for that one. Automotive journalism has that problem to solve. How are you going to describe the characteristics of a performance car? Because everybody knows that 0 to 60 times kind of don't really matter anymore. You used to be able to say that, and, you know, maybe the braking distance and stuff like that, and then you're done. But right now, the best sports cars on the market aren't necessarily the fastest cars. So the decades and decades and decades of being able to say, oh, it's 300 horsepower, it's 400 horsepower, it's 500 horsepower. Those days are gone, because every car is a sub 3 second 0 to 60 car. And we're going to have to get a lot more creative in terms of how we describe what we're experiencing in cars. I have beat that horse to death. Actually, the horse has been dead. Let's move on. Formula One. All right, let's talk F1. So if you saw the F1 75 event, you know, the 75 years of F1, where they unveiled all the liveries of the different cars all at the same time, if you notice something beyond folks booing Red Bull, in particular Christian Horner, see my video for what I thought about that. But if you notice anything beyond that, you'll notice that the cars didn't really look that much different from one another. They actually kind of looked a lot like each other, and they look like last year's car. But that's actually typical at this point in a given set of regulations. What I mean by that is we're on the last year. So not only are the different constructors studying each other's homework, they're studying their own homework from previous years, and we're getting to a point where everything is converging, designs are converging, so you're just polishing, you're not coming out with these huge differences, these huge noticeable differences. You're now kind of polishing what you've done over the last 4 years, unless you're Mercedes, and Mercedes, you're trying to just get it right this year, which maybe they did. We'll talk about that very soon. Now, there was one car that had a lot of differences, and one fascinating difference I will call out, and that is going to be the McLaren car for 2025. So they adjusted the track rods and the upper wishbone to create a slight aerodynamic advantage, and it's significant because no other team has done that. And I'm going to show you a little graphic that I got from another podcast, and I'll put the link to that. It was the Peter Windsor one. And so the wishbone suspension and the track rods are kind of like pushed forward in a V. I'll put the graphic up there. And that was done to give the car really just a slight aerodynamic advantage. So apparently that shape for the wishbone suspension helps to funnel the air into the rear facing wing and diffuser and all that kind of stuff. What it could do though is cause some rigidity issues. So especially in the case of a side impact or some wheel-to-wheel contact during racing. Now, they've all got to pass the crash tests, so we're not talking about side impact as in terms of the car's going to be more dangerous to a driver than another car. But given the position of the suspension, if there is wheel-to-wheel contact, would that mean that the car that impacted the McLaren would be okay while the McLaren's front suspension would be toast? Who knows? We'll see during the year. Now, that could be a great innovation, and we could see the McLaren pulling away from a field that it is already forecast to be faster than, or it can be akin to Mercedes and their Zero side pod, which did not work very well at all. Let's move on to some other constructors. So let's talk quickly about Williams. Sainz does not think he'll be fighting for the top positions in 2025, and he also admitted that he's a little bit lost in the cockpit of the Williams car. Specifically, he said, I feel like when I push it, I can get a decent level, but I still don't know where the last 2/10 are. Now, I understand, what he means by that. If you've played any iRacing or something, you go into a track that is similar to, or you go into a track that but with a different car, it takes you a while to figure out how to get the last little bits of speed out of that car. Now, of note, Williams is the most improved car over last year, for testing anyway, but there's going to be some room for Sainz to improve. So maybe we'll assume that Sainz in the Williams car is going to have a little bit of a slower start and then progress as the year continues. Now, Ferrari still has some downforce issues, and they're still suffering from tire drag during high-speed corners. Ferrari, I think, is going to be in the top 2 or 3 this year, so it's going to be a very interesting season to watch for them. And Red Bull is struggling with understeer issues. Now, understeer issues plagued the Red Bull since the T-valve saga of last year, and look for more understeer issues this year as well. Now, of note, the Red Bull is still a very quick car, and I've got 100% faith that Max Verstappen is still going to be able to extract every bit of speed from that car, but the problem comes with the second driver. So we saw the issue with Perez not being able to perform as well as Verstappen in the second car, and we've got a new driver in Liam Lawson. So it doesn't matter how good of a driver Liam Lawson is when you're coming into a new car, though he did, drive some Red Bull hardware last season, he's still going to have some issues keeping up with Max Verstappen because he's going to be new in this car for the full season. So a couple of indicators. You could see FlowViz on the side of the car during the final laps of testing. FlowViz is kind of that green gunk that goes across the car, and when the wind and whatever is interacting with the FlowViz, it starts to create different streaks, and that is what the engineers use to figure out, if the aero is behaving in the way that they wanted. And the FlowViz during the last final laps of the car, or during the last final laps of testing, signify that Red Bull engineers were still trying to figure out some last-minute solutions for testing. And Pierre Wache also said it was not as smooth a test as we expected. So who knows, maybe Red Bull is going to have a difficult start to the season, which is different because Red Bull typically has been coming out of the gate ever since 2021-22, with an early advantage. And matter of fact, that's how they won the Drivers' Championship last year. The beginning of their season was a lot better than the last half of the season. Now, McLaren is still looking to be the favorite. The only, I would say, limitation that they might have is some rear axle instability. But every car is going to have a flaw. The flaw with this one is still leaving the McLaren as most likely the fastest car on the grid coming up this season. Mercedes and Ferrari, very similar lap times, but for very different reasons. The Mercedes is a lot faster for corner entry, and the Ferrari is faster in straight lines. So what that means is that a track that is going to feature tons of high-end, high-speed corners like a Spa, you might see Mercedes having a bigger advantage versus a track like Monza that's got long straights. You'll see Ferrari having an advantage. But the big thing is, the big show for 2025 is most likely going to be Mercedes versus Ferrari, and that is for constructors. Now, the big show might also be between Mercedes and Ferrari, because you're going to have Mercedes with Kimi Antonelli and George Russell. No love lost between George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. And then you're going to have Kimi Antonelli versus, Hamilton and Leclerc and whatnot. So that might be the show to watch. And if McLaren can't get their act together in terms of, who's lead driver, who's second driver orders, papaya rules, if McLaren can't take advantage of having the faster car and they fall into the race pace of Mercedes and Ferrari, who will be battling it out, it can turn out to be a very hectic, a very entertaining season for the top three contenders. Add in a very fast Max Verstappen, who is always going to drive a car very fast, and this could be absolutely electrifying. And of course, Stake is in last place in terms of testing speed. This was a very long video, but so much entertaining stuff going on. I'm still working on the car show video, the North Texas Auto Expo, and I am looking forward to the first race. That is, let me look at my calendar, on Sunday, March 16th. That is going to be an amazing race day coming out of Australia. And that's the video. I've been Dalton. This has been the Petrolist, and you have been amazing. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.